Yeah, hello and welcome to a new Courage Skyline Talk. The topic today is Trumponomics versus Bidenomics and the implications for Germany's economy. My guest today is the renowned journalist Todd Buell. Todd worked for many years for the Global Wall Street Journal, where he was mainly the expert for the European Central Bank. And today, Todd is editor-at-large at Law 360. Todd, welcome. I'm so glad to have you.
It's great to be here, Claudia. Thanks for having me on.
Todd, maybe for those who don't know Law 360, would you mind explaining a bit what Law 360 is about and what your role there is?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So we're a news service for legal professionals based in the United States, and I sit in Brussels and I write for the Law 360 newsletter that focuses on tax policy. So I've written about all sorts of things that have to do with generally European tax policy, things having to do with corporate tax, value-added tax, and yeah, so that's my specialization now. But as you said before, I wrote about the European Central Bank when I was based in Frankfurt.
Great, great. And I'm so glad to have you because you really understand, of course, United States, being an American, and you lived in Europe for almost 20 years, you mentioned. So you also know how Europe ticks, and particularly also Germany, because you lived also in Germany for a very long time.
Right, yeah.
That is great and important for the questions. Just as a short background for here the community, and I was asked this question, why am I doing the talks with experts like you, Todd, on the United States and Germany? The reason is threefold. First of all, of course, 2024 is the year of the election in the United States. They will vote for a new president on 5th of November. And this, of course, has implications for Germany and for Europe, politically and economically and globally, of course. Second, I always had a high affinity to the United States and their can-do mentality. And I have the feeling in the moment in particular, there's a time again that shows this can-do mentality in the United States and how they handle crises differently maybe than Germany does. And the third aspect is many companies think about expanding to the United States right now, not only big companies, also smaller companies, and amongst them also client of ours. And we love to give them an insight and a basis for discussion, what's going on in the United States from people like you, Todd, who really know what's going on there, and in Europe. Is it a good time to expand or not? And this is maybe also for everybody who's listening and interested, please comment, please ask questions. Also, if there are any topics you would like us to discuss in one of the upcoming interviews, or you would like Todd to answer after the interview, as we couldn't cover them as part of the interview. Okay, first question, Todd. Currently, Germany seems to be the lame duck again, whether justified or not. We Germans have a tendency to talk ourselves into crisis, worsening them. Seems to be true. However, high energy costs, excessive bureaucracy, and labor shortages cannot be sugarcoated. Moreover, the economic growth rate at 0.2%, in the United States 2.7%, correct me if I'm wrong, leaves much to be desired. Many mid-sized companies are considering expanding to the United States. Where do you, Todd, perceive strengths of the US market compared to Germany? And conversely, where might Germany hold an advantage? And please, Todd, not only you as a tax expert, where you see the differences, but also in terms of mentality, where do you see differences?
Sure. Well, I mean, we can leave the tax system aside. I mean, I'll just say they're complicated in both jurisdictions. I think that's a safe statement to say, but they have differences. But I'll leave that maybe to a more more professional tax specialist. But more broadly speaking, I mean, which side has the advantages or disadvantages, or I mean, in the United States, you of course have very large market. What's it, something like 340 330 million people. It seems to be, growing at least over the, sort of medium to longer term. Also, you have, it's all in, I mean, of course, there are many different languages that are spoken in the United States, but in general, you could say it's, one language zone throughout the entire country. So that makes, it provides some ease, I think, for people wanting to invest there. We also, of course, depending on the industry that you're investing in, there have been, the Biden administration had the landmark, Inflation Reduction Act, but it provided subsidies for green investments and environmentally friendly investments, things like that. That one could say may have caught Europe a little bit by surprise. Europe has the state aid rules that it has to, find ways of, I don't know, modifying, massaging, trying to sort of work around when it comes to matching the benefits that the U.S. is giving to green investments. So, I mean, and you've seen in the news, I mean, you see periodically in companies making investments, European companies making investments in the United States, and so and it's forcing European leaders to try to react and find ways of, not only keeping investment in Europe, but also attracting investment from other parts of the world to Europe. I mean, I think what Germany has to its benefit certainly is, I mean, it has a very skilled workforce. I think that can certainly, still be rightfully claimed. It's in the center of Europe, the common EU market. I mean, Germany itself has, 85 million people, and then is in the center of, a EU market with, I forget the exact number, but something in the range of, 450 million. So in that sense, Germany has advantages too, certainly. So, but I think, as you were alluding to in the question, just the general issue of growth. I mean, you see that the U.S. right now is growing at a much faster pace than Germany, than even its peers in the group of 7, industrial countries. And this is something that, I think has to be noted, has to be taken seriously as a challenge for Europe. I mean, it's how, you grow the economy, or the economy expands, that creates wealth, that creates more that can be redistributed if, depending on the political choices that each system, that politicians, that the population wants. So it's something that, and I hear it talked about more in Brussels, and as an issue that Europe, I think, is aware of and trying to do something about.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And Todd, with the election year, do you see any risks, both politically and economically, if Donald Trump were to be re-elected, for German companies expanding?
I mean, I think there certainly are risks. I mean, although I, also want to be very clear, it's not for me to tell anyone who they should or should not vote for, but I think looking just at the facts, looking objectively at your question, I mean, one risk has to be, protectionism, certainly, or, further tariffs on products that are, exported from Germany into the United States. Of course, I mean, President Biden has not been a champion of free trade, to be very clear, but I think with Trump, there's a risk of, I can see it in the trade field in at least twofold. One is just protectionism, tariffs, things like that. The other thing, it's a little broader. It's just, I think, a sense with, with Trump, that it's a certain, there'd be a certain, unpredictability, or it would be, you know, a little bit hard to know exactly what he's going to do, which, I mean, I think businesses of all types want certainty, they want reliability, they want as much as possible that to know that, you know, the rules of today are the rules of tomorrow, or if the rules are going to change, they want to know how they will change, and knowing that they have enough time to prepare. And I think what we saw just very broadly in Trump's first term was a sense of, yeah, unpredictability, a sense of chaos, a sense of, you know, just sort of not knowing what, for example, what he's going to tweet today or something. Now, one could imagine that, I mean, he has more of a team now. He may have more of a plan. There may be some more reliability, but again, it's, you know, the direction of travel that he may be going in, whether it's protectionism, whether it's perhaps being closer to, I don't know, dictators, authoritarian leaders than American presidents generally are. There's also, I think, a broader question from a business point of view. I mean, I can imagine a business person might say, well, okay, under Trump, you know, I paid lower taxes, or he supports lower taxes, which, yes, you know, objectively, I think is true. But there is also, I think, a broader question about rule of law, and, you know, what, again, I'm really just, you know, asking questions, not trying to give an answer, but what would the election of Trump suggest about the rule of law in the United States, or the value that American citizens put on the rule of law? And I think that's something that that has to matter for businesses as well. But of course, I mean, I say these things now, and we have to see what, you know, how his trials play out. I mean, you know, he's, like any defendant, is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of putting ideas out here of things that, you know, business leaders are probably thinking about regarding, you know, what happens if Trump wins. You know, trade protectionism, reliability, rule of law, connection to dictators. We'll see.
Very interesting. We could talk about this for another hour, Todd. And we don't want to talk about Ukraine, right? What it means for Europe. I mean, it seems to be here what his plans are. We often hear.
Yeah. I mean, and that, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but just, you know, taking a very, you know, big picture view. Yeah, I mean, we don't, it's hard to know. I mean, there's the thought that he would, you know, Trump would come in and sort of end the war in one day. I think he said something like this, but this would probably or potentially involve Ukraine giving up territory, which, you know, is certainly not a just peace. I mean, it would be you know, would involve peace, and I don't know, in the grand history of things, countries have had to make unfortunate compromises, you know, frequently. So it wouldn't be something unheard of. But again, it's sort of again back to the rule of law point. You know, it would be, okay, we've stopped it, but what message does this send to Putin or other autocrats, China, for example, about, you know, what they would be able to do in claiming land, and that would create global uncertainty, or potentially could create global uncertainty, higher energy prices, and it would potentially higher energy prices, and that would create trouble potentially also for business. But it's becoming very hypothetical here. But it's, you know, these are the big picture questions that I'm sure business need to think about and are thinking about.
Absolutely. And, you know, he mentioned very clearly those who don't pay their fair share in Europe. He's happy in motivating Putin to get in touch to say it this way. Well,
yes, I mean that was shocking. That was a shocking statement, albeit not surprising, but still quite shocking. That's true. Yeah.
Todd, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has issued warnings regarding the US's significant debt burden. Neither Trump nor Biden seem to have plans for austerity measures. Where do you anticipate the medium-term trajectory heading?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, and you're right. At least to my knowledge, you don't hear austerity, or I mean, some people see that as a dirty word, but let's say, more neutrally, like cost-saving measures. You don't hear that discussed very much. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, and I think, but I also think it's an issue where, as long as the world continues to want to buy American U.S. dollar denominated assets, government bonds, as long as the U.S. can keep refinancing the debt, it's an issue that, I mean, I don't want to say it's not serious. I mean, it is, but it's something that maybe isn't becoming as serious as it would be if suddenly there was a big sell-off in U.S. government assets, or U.S. government bonds. But I mean, there was an article in the New York Times recently by one of the opinion columnists who I respect, David Brooks, who talked about this issue and just the amount of money that the U.S. is spending on debt interest, and it raises the question, one spends this money to pay off debt, but it could be spent on more productive uses, or is private investment being crowded out, as they say. So, but it was striking reading that article, because I thought, that it was like the 1990s sort of come back to the New York Times for a second, because I remember this being talked about, 25 years ago,
right,
more, but it's not an issue that is being discussed much. But yeah, I mean, yeah, because it involves, cutting things like retirement benefits or benefits to people is, of course, not popular. I mean, it's an issue that Europe also has to take seriously. I mean, Europe has the so-called, the Maastricht rules, and the 60% debt limit on debt to GDP. So the rules are at least there. Of course, they're not followed precisely, but I mean,
but
Europe has.
sorry to interrupt you, but
Sorry.
the US, we talk trillions, right? I mean, the amount of deficit spending over there can't be compared to Europe in the moment, particularly Germany, maybe Italy. Some countries have issues. And therefore, I wonder, I mean, Trump is promising further tax reductions. I mean, so further additional increase. And I just wonder, you don't see any risk in the upcoming years, though, that this may lead to a disadvantage of the United States and really to insecurity?
I think, I mean, again, a bit of a issue. I'm a little bit beyond my core competence, let's say, but I could say that if the U.S. Gets a rival as the sort of financial superpower, if there becomes another safe asset that investors look to besides the U.S. dollar,
right,
then certainly I would think the U.S. would be in trouble, or could be in trouble, regarding its debt. But I don't see that happening anytime very soon. I mean,
okay.
I mean, I just don't.
From experts like you. Thanks, Todd. That's really good to hear.
I mean,
But the last question, how does the US view Germany? You know, you an American, what do people think about, you know, we Germans over exaggerate always, right, our situation. So how is the perception in the United States? Some top German bankers actually believe that Germany is in a strong position. With some adjustments from the government, they argue Germany could once again emerge as a front runner. What's your point of view, and what is the American point of view on this, maybe?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult for me to speak on behalf of an entire country, but I mean, I can just say I had very positive experiences living in Germany, and I know it's, you know, many Americans live there, and many. In fact, I think this was even a I think it was even a cover story or a main story in The Economist some years ago about the number of Americans who, you know, ethnically are, have German ancestors,
Yeah.
and so I mean, I haven't seen data on it, but I suspect that all in all, probably Americans, maybe on average, have a generally positive viewpoint of Germany now. For obvious historical reasons we don't need to get into, that may not have been the case a generation or two ago, but I think now, I think it's generally seen as a, serious economic country known for, good products. And also, I think for people who visit over here, or visit Germany, I should say, people see, I don't know, they take the trains and often are sometimes are impressed by it. And then I will sometimes mention, oh, you're lucky that it was on time. And they're like, wait, really? It's not always on time? It's like, no, it's not always on time. But people still say, oh, but it's nicer than the trains in the US. And I mean, yes, that's certainly a connected network. That's true. Yeah.
Economically, Todd, I mean, I hear the number of investments into Germany is really further decreasing. Even France has a much higher number of investments, and investors tend to step back from Germany because of all the issues we mentioned earlier, bureaucracy, high energy costs.
Yeah.
How do you see this? Is this not an issue for the United States at all? You think Americans will still come over to Germany, see it's a great country, great products?
Well, I mean, I think from a point of view of a tourist, they would come and see what I was talking about. But certainly the issues that you mentioned, I think, matter to
Oh, yeah.
to businesses and investors. I mean, this was again, it was an article in a major English-speaking
Right.
newspaper I read recently that talked, about the concerns that just the German firms are having dealing with bureaucracies and rules. And I think they even talked about, multiple data protection laws that they have to keep
Yeah.
track of. And so I think it's definitely something that potential investors into Germany sit, you know, look, want to look closely at for sure. Yeah.
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 So, I mean, what would be maybe a last statement from yours? What could Germany do if you think about also the can-do mentality of the United States? Is there something we can learn?
I mean, it's not, I don't think it's for me to, give advice to Germans or to Germany, but I mean, yes, I mean, there is certainly I think sometimes this spirit of, wanting to try new things or to, make investments and whatever
Yeah.
that America is known for.
Right.
And I think, finding ways to encourage that among people is good for any society, certainly. And I mean, I know that it's also something that the EU has been trying to do to, create common capital market, even also streamline even bankruptcy laws. I know that's something that's talked about here I read that, I think I read this even just the other day, that people say, well, in the, US, if you go, bankrupt as a business person, you can, pick things up and try again. And in Europe, it's just sort of like you're out forever. I mean, I'm generalizing perhaps a little bit there, but that's something that I've read for years. Is something that there's a push to try to see streamlined or made more what's the word, more to give people more of an incentive to try something. Yeah, motivate. Exactly.
Motivational kick. Yeah. Okay. Well, you can say it. Okay, Todd. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and, you're welcome.
Yeah. For anybody, like I mentioned, who has additional questions to Todd, feel free to comment. And I hope it's fine for you, Todd, if they maybe contact you directly as well.
Of course. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.